So do you know where to get your archery equipment? Well, we might be able to answer that today. Hi, my name is Roy Canterbury. I'm the host today on Archery Talk 101. And on the show today, we have Seth. And I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Roy. Seth Poston. I'm the owner of Sirius Archery Products and Toughhead Broadhead. We're based just south of Cincinnati in northern Kentucky, and having a phenomenal year this year so far, and we're excited to be here.
Yeah, so how did you get started in archery?
Well, I've got bow hunting, or started bow hunting in probably 25 years ago or so, and like everybody, kind of get hooked on it and go deep diving into it. When I originally started, I think my parents got me a Bear Jennings bow. I mean, this is going back to probably 1989, and I think I was 14, and it had a draw length of about 35 inches, I think, and it felt like it was about 180 pounds. I think it was set at 50, but it was kind of a miserable experience getting started, and put it down for a while. It really wasn't fun. Then I was a full-time fireman for the city of Covington, Kentucky, and spent 22 years there, and got back into it because a lot of the guys there hunted, and that's how we bonded a lot off duty with that. And so picked it back up, just loved it, love everything about bow hunting. I love watching the flight of arrows, and I like hyper tuning and that. So, but in the process of working at Covington Fire Department, I had also started fire and EMS sales and service business, and the dealership for Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. And God was just very blessing to us, and He gave us a lot of increase, and it did very, very well. And I sold that to a private equity group in 2018. So Sirius Archery, I had been shooting their products before ever even thought about this. It wasn't even a thought in my mind. And I scheduled a hunt to Canada in, I think it was in May or late May, early June of 20. And lo and behold, the border was closed because of COVID. But they assured us that they were going to open it 2 days before our hunt was supposed to start. So I had broken a few arrows and wanted to take some extras with me. So I called Sirius at the time. It was Andy Dutton and Tim Thacker, just two wonderful individuals. And was talking with them and said, hey, is there any way you could rush me out some arrows? I'll pay you the express shipping. And because they're going to open the border. Long story short, they didn't open the border for 9 or 10 more months. But in the process of calling them back after we found out no, they weren't gonna open the border, I said, hey, you don't need to cancel my order, but I don't need the express shipping. Don't break your neck to get them out. Well, just as the way God worked things out, there were 2 cancellations on one of the owners' bear trip to Maine for the same exact time. So he said, hey, would you guys like to go? Oh, it worked out great. So we went up there and hunted, and he stayed for, I think, 2.5 days after driving 22 hours to Maine because he was just buried under with orders. And he said, I got to get back. So he drove 22 hours back. And so I just felt God saying, hey, give him a call, and shot him a text actually and said, hey, would you guys be interested in selling? Because I had some investment money from my previous exit that I wanted to invest. And so he said, I'll have to talk to my partner, Andy, and we'll get back to you. So about a week later, they both had successful careers outside of this as well. And so about a week later, we had started going into negotiations. They decided they want to sell. 3 weeks later, the lawyers were all done, and I was the owner of Sirius Archery Products. So it had a really good firm foundation because Andy was an aerospace engineer with GE. So he does the engineering and still does adjunct engineering for us today. He's a composites expert. So he was really, really good. The product that I was buying from them and all the intellectual property and everything was just really sound. So we had a good start there. And then that's when I made my hobby my job. So they say never do that. There's a good reason. But they gave excellent customer service, and that was the one thing that I insisted on, was just having spectacular customer service, because I don't care, we can make an arrow that won't break, but you don't want to shoot it. So if there is ever any issues, or you're getting on ready to go to a hunt, we specialize in a lot of Africa stuff right now. They're kind of the go-to for Africa. So, and a lot of these guys call up and they're like, oh man, my hunt's 2 weeks out. Can you help me with this? And right before this call, I have a guy that's 3 weeks out and he still doesn't have everything together for a Cape Buffalo hunt. So we're getting everything together for him. But, one of the things that we provide that a lot of places don't is we'll give you free 15 minutes to talk about your setup, get everything just right, so that you're in the absolute best setting that you can be. And a lot of this problem stems from, and I don't blame it on these folks, but you have the local bow shop, right? And they just don't make enough from the manufacturers on bows. And that's what it comes down to. If you make $200 on a bow, you're doing really good. Well, I mean, you figure, if you're a good dealer and sell 300 bows in a year, $60,000, and you got to keep the lights on and carry inventory and pay somebody. And so a lot of these shops, there's a lot of good ones, but there's some where they hire the 18-year-old kid that's spit and dip into a Mountain Dew bottle and telling you how stupid you are for shooting this, that, or the other. And lo and behold, we get a lot of people that call us because they're just frustrated. They're at wit's end, and we help them through and get them into the right setup, and then they're fine. But now there's a few other companies that have started to do the same thing that we're doing, just because of our success, I'm sure. And they're giving out some free phone consultation as well. But we've done that since the very beginning. You can schedule time with us, get on the calendar. We'll make sure everything's right with your setup. Because a lot of what happens is when you're not super strong at tuning your bow, you just tell the customer, throw a mechanical on the front and shoot light and fast, because that covers up a lot of issues. And as soon as you start shooting a more adult setup and you're shooting a little bit heavier point weight and you're a little bit stronger setup, well, boy, that really starts to lower the water in the creek, and the rocks really start showing up, and it's frustrating, right. And then you take it back to that bow shop 2 or 3 times and they can't help you, and then they tell you you're dumb for shooting what you're shooting. And so we get a lot of customers that way. But that's how we got Sirius, and we bought that in July of 2020, right in the middle of COVID. Then in 2021, I was already friends with Jason Wojciechowicz, and we just call him Wojo, from Toughhead Broadhead. And we had done some stuff together where I worked with him on some social media stuff and things like that. And we purchased them in July of 2021. So we then opened up our eyes to the whole marketing thing. And, I was able to pull away a really, really talented guy named Connor Akers, who was producing another television show, and pull him over. And so we have Sirius Outdoor Productions. And that's where we create the Sirius Outdoor TV, Sirius Podcast, and all the media stuff that we do. So it's going well. It's going really, really well. We're really blessed where we are right now. I think our economy hit us a little bit. We're in that upper end market. We're not going to be your say Carbon Express price point or Black Eagle price point. We're up there, and it's just the differences in Carbon. They make a great product in their price range, and we're just in a little bit different one. But being in that high end range, I think we're starting to see that people are saying, oh, I'm going to get those arrows, but I'll probably wait a little closer to season. We've been seeing the trend change over the last 2 years, and this year it's been and getting people to calling in. And we do have a value arrow where it's still really straight, an 001 straight arrow, still strong, but it's made of a carbon that's cost a little bit less, and that lets people get into a good straight arrow that may not be able to get into our other arrows. And we've seen a big jump in the sales of those. So we can definitely see that the economy is starting to change things a little bit.
Yeah, I know that I only shoot the 1000 straightness arrows. I had a shop, an archery shop back about a little over 20 years ago. And what you were saying about we don't make much money off the bows. The low end bow, which is the PSE Nova, because I was a PSE dealer, I made about $90 to $95 off the sale of the bow. The high end bow, I made about 110, 120. So I'm roughly making $100 per bow sale.
Right. Right.
You can't make on it. But where we made up for it is selling accessories, because the higher end bows are just plain bow, no kits. Low end ones were a kit. And, kind of helping out the beginner, I included half a dozen arrows with it, because the PSE Nova back then come with, a stabilizer, a sight, the rest, and a quiver. I put 6 arrows in it with tips in it. I included one of those little cheap Patriot releases, just to get them started. I put a sling on it, string dampers on it, tied what we used to call little poofle balls. They were fishing jig making material, like making bass jigs.
Yeah.
And we'd cut them about 2-3 inches long, tie them in the middle, and you pull them and cut them. They might form little balls. It's like, that's fun to do.
And they worked really, really well. I'm
Yeah.
actually putting them back on my bow now.
Now I've gone to like the limb savers you just put in the string, and I put them not on the string, but I put them on the cables.
Yeah.
Anything you can pluck and decrease the sound. Of course, it slows it down. Like everything you put on your bow, everything you do, other than 70 pounds, 30-inch draw length, 350 grain arrow with 1 knock point, is going to slow it down.
Right. Right.
And nobody shoots that.
When you do the math on this stuff, we are getting really, that's one of the things that our customers get really torqued out around about is speed. And when you do the math at 20, 30, and even 40 yards, we're talking thousandths of a second difference between a lot of these deliveries. When you're talking, and, not just anecdotal, but just even that we do a lot of testing here. Anytime you can get between, say, 250 and 270, even 275 feet per second, there's a real sweet spot there where you still have good speed, but your arrow flight is significantly better, and you don't have to hyper tune for that. When you start pushing 300 feet per second, everything has to be just right. And so when you get that bow that the 18-year-old set up for you that didn't exactly know what he was doing, and let's just say, you're shooting an arrow at 305 feet per second because you put you in a 400 spine that's really light with a 100 grain point, and then you can't figure out why the thing doesn't fly. A lot of that could be helped by just putting a little bit more weight on there and getting that speed down. And, people are very keen to notice when the speed comes down, right? Well, I might not be able to shoot out to 95 yards on that mule deer. Chances are you shouldn't be doing that anyways, if you can't get your bow to tune and get it to shoot right without having to throw a mechanical on the front. So just looking at that speed. And so that's one of the things that we have a Tyler inside here who is fantastic with technical stuff. He and I field all the technical calls, and we don't go for any like particular arrow weight. We're looking more to try to get you in that 250 to 275 foot per second range, because we know that that's where your best flight's going to happen. And that may mean that your arrow might be 550, and it also may mean that your arrow may be 510, but we want to get you in that range. And it does depend a little bit. If you're an out west hunter, we have some lighter setups with different arrows where it has a lighter GPI at the same spine, and they cost a little more, but we can get you that longer range at that same speed. So we're a whole lot more concerned with perfect arrow flight than we are with speed hang up or any of the rest.
Yeah, and what I've found over the many years I've been doing this is the faster the bow, the better your form has to be.
Absolutely. And the
'Cause
more you better be shooting.
Yeah, it just seems like the faster, the more it magnifies your errors. So, like we was talking about earlier, you have a perfectly tuned bow. It'll put every shot will put it in the same hole every time. No matter what distance you're at. You put a
Right.
human in there and you can't do it no more. I've seen perfectly tuned bows have terrible tears, and somebody else shoots it, gets a perfect hole. It's like,
That's right.
what is it? It's your form. It's
Yeah.
so important, because if you don't know, and that's why when I had my store, you buy a bow, even the low end Nova bows at the time, which had the two little round wheels and the steel cables that you fasten the string to. It come with shooting instruction. I'm going to teach you how to shoot. For one, you're going to shoot better, you're going to enjoy the sport, and you're going to upgrade to the higher end ones later. If you're not having fun, a lot of people, we like to hit what we're aiming at, and that's why I always taught them how to do it. And that was just one of the things that I did. Every bow come with shooting instruction. I'm going to teach you how to shoot.
Right. In shooting is like any other sport. This is a sport, and sport requires practice. You're not going to go out and drive a 300-yard golf ball perfectly down the middle all the time unless you're putting a whole lot of time into it. And archery is the same way. You've got to get that form down. You do have to have good equipment. But I'm sure that you or I could take a bow from a big box store, and put some time into it and have it shooting perfect out to 40 or 50 yards. It's not that amount of money you have to spend on the equipment, but you do have to know how to tune it, and you're going to have to spend some time with it for sure.
Yeah. Well, my hunting bow is 22 years old.
Yeah. Right.
2001 PSE career. That's what I hunt with. And then my next newer bow is only a couple of years newer. That's the one I use for, targets and 3Ds, because my hunting bow is set up for hunting only. And then here a few years back when I was working at Cabela's, I managed to get one of their returns. That's not a PSE, it's a Bear. But I don't even have it set up yet. I had to do some repairs on it because it was a return with problems. And so I fixed it all up, being a bow tech for, many years. It's like, hey, I'll spend $150 for $900 Bear bow, just plain bow.
Right.
Because I know how to fix it. As long as the limbs aren't, well, if the limbs are cracked, then you can get a hold of them and they can send you new limbs.
Right. And, right now I'm shooting the PSE Levitate, which I have really enjoyed. They built one for me because we were filming a show over in where we were supposed to do a rhino hunt. I'm sorry, not rhino hunt, a hippo hunt. And it wound up falling through. And we wound up doing a Cape Buffalo last year anyways. But I kind of fell in love with that bow, and then wound up subsequently getting another one that's not set at 85 pounds for everyday normal shooting. And I really do enjoy that. But, I think the first PSE that I fell in love with was the old PSE X-Force. You remember when that came out? That was their first speed bow. And that was one of the best bows I ever had. And then they came out the next year with the PSE X-Force Omen. And it subsequently turned into the worst bow I had ever had in my life. And so, I've not particular to any one manufacturer. I've shot several of them and had good bows from a lot of them, but it's going to be really hard to break the Levitate out of my hand right now. I shot through their new line of their 2023 bows, and there's nothing's going to make me give up the 2022 yet. So we'll see what comes out next year, but yet. So.
Yeah, I know. It's like the PSE Baby G. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah.
It was one of those, either you loved it or you hated it. There was no, it's like, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, right. Well, we were talking about form before, and one of the things that we see a lot of it when guys are having difficulties in getting arrows to tune well is we have issues with them giving us pictures of their lefts and rights. So as they're setting up their bow, if they, can you just put it through paper for us? And you'll see a bullet hole, then you'll see a big tear right, and then you'll see a big tear left. Well, those don't happen unless it's your form.
Right.
You'll see consistent right, consistent left, or consistent bullet hole, but we'll get them all over the board. And so form is so important, and just repetition. And YouTube has some really, really good videos on proper form. And there's plenty of. I'm sure that on your Facebook page, if somebody took a picture of what their form looked like, you'd get tons of comments from guys wanting to help them out and say, "Hey, you're doing that looks great," or
Yeah.
"Hey, it looks like your draw length's short or too long," or
Well, better yet, take a video and upload the video to the group.
Yeah.
We do that. That's one of the things that you can do in the group is, the Architect 101 Facebook group. Upload a video. You just can't put a YouTube video up there because we don't allow links into the group. But take your video, upload the raw video. We'll look at it and give you some critiques. I became an archery instructor in '95, and I've taught a lot of people how to shoot. So, yeah, that's the fun part. Especially when you get a student that is now out shooting what you can shoot. That's
Right.
the ultimate student, is one that can outshoot you when you're out there shooting with them. And especially as you get older, it's harder to hold steady and see.
I that's been the biggest issue as I've aged is seeing either you get clarity with your target or you get clarity with your pins, but it's really difficult to get both.
Yeah, and the older you get, the harder it is to do that. The young guys, they can do that, and that's just something that's really you just work through it and shoot, do what you want to do.
That's
Have
right.
fun.
That's right.
I'm not going to take those 80, 100-yard shots because, for me, I can't see well enough to see them that far. And around here in Nebraska, I live in eastern part of Nebraska, and we're not going to have more than about 40-yard shot anyway.
Right.
We may have some longer, but there's a lot of trees and stuff, especially when hunting in forest. You'd be lucky to get a 20-yard shot in, a lot of the forests. And so I don't need to take the long shots. And, I do like to practice the longer ranges just because it makes your skill better up close. It's always fun helping people out how to shoot. And that's one of the things I do, with the podcast here is, providing value to them. And one of the requirements to be on the podcast is, do you want to start archery? Are you shooting archery beginner, or are you Olympic, or you a pro archer, or you have an archery related business? We're going to talk archery,
Right.
and I like to get the new ones on because, like, hey, what are you looking for? Here's what we can help. Let's get in here and talk about stuff. So, that's just all what you do as well with your business. You're helping that person out, and I've seen a lot of problems come through, and it's not the equipment, it's the person shooting them, and that's just what's always a lot of fun.
Right. I have really enjoyed seeing the number of questions we're getting now from female shooters, where as everyone knows, the number of hunting licenses is going down every year. So we need to, if we're going to save our sport, we're really going to have to focus on all demographics and making it this inclusive for everybody, and not making people feel dumb when they ask questions. And I'm in a few different Facebook groups where they just get downright nasty with each other, and I'm like, why are we tearing each other apart over a sport that we all love? It doesn't make any sense. You shoot what you want to shoot heavy, shoot light, shoot whatever. If you call in and ask our opinion on and try to help you get set up, you'll get our opinion. But at the end of the day, if you decide to shoot something else, we're certainly not going to be mad at you. You do what you like to do, and for your area, like I think last year the stat was something. It's 17 point something yards was the average shot on whitetail deer. So most places in the country, it would be great to be able to, and I think people should work to be accurate at 60 and 70 and 80 yards, because it makes
Right.
that 15-yard shot, look like you're shooting a basketball instead of trying to hit a dot. And you're just better off for doing it. But the reality of it is that you need to be proficient to 40. Be proficient to 40, and you're going to be able to shoot just about anything in North America within 40.
Yeah. Some animals are a little bit harder, like the antelope, because it's hard to get close to them unless you set up on a watering hole or something. But
I guess
yeah,
there's that exception, because I have a very good friend who owns Land of Enchantment outfitting, and Corey is a phenomenal outfitter, and he's one of the few out in New Mexico and in Arizona that will cater to the bow hunter, because it's hard. A lot of places won't even
right.
take bow hunters. But his average shot last year was 62 yards
Oh, yeah,
across all of his bow hunters. So you do have to be, if you're going to go for those, that's a whole different setup too. That's something you need
yeah.
to call in, and we need to get you set up, and you're going to need to hyper tune, because it's going to be a long shot. But the good news is you're shooting at something really small at a long distance, so that makes it even easier, right?
Yeah. Well, it makes you focus a little on a smaller target.
That's
Aim
right.
small, miss small, right?
That's right. That's right. So
Yeah, that's so how would they get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of you?
SiriusArchery.com, like Sirius, like the satellite, SIRIUS archery.com, or toughhead.com is another one. That's on our that's our broadhead side. So either one of those will get you there. You can find the 800 number on there. Email. We're easy to get a hold of. We have Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and every other kind of thing an old guy like me doesn't know about. But I do have young guys that do know it, so it works out all right.
Yeah, what I can actually do for those that get to watch it is I'll share my screen and I'll show your website or your Facebook page. Right here's your Facebook page. So if you want to get a hold of you, it's just Seth.Poston, and that is information here on your page. And then let's go to your website here. And that's, like you said, is SiriusArchery.com. And here's your website. You can get help. There's a phone number to call over here on the right hand side when you get there. Looks like your site has all kinds of stuff out here to go. Here's your tough head broadheads.
Yeah, that'll take you right to the tough head page. We have some calculators that are on the back on the other page that we can go to, and whenever you have time.
Yeah,
they're really good for. We spend a lot of money on if you go to spine and arrow calculators, top bar, keep going right.
oh, there it is.
So if you want to figure out your FOC on your arrow, the center one there, that will calculate any arrow that we produce. And if you can click right on that, and then it'll take you in, and then you can mock up your arrow as many times as you want. That's a really useful tool for figuring out, because we do a lot of custom arrows, probably 10,000 custom arrows or more a year. And so one of the things you will need to know is the weight of what you want your final arrow to be. And then we're going to hit that within 1 grain or so. So you can just select your arrow and your spine and put in your point weight. And, if you're going to shoot a wrap, you're not going to shoot a wrap, you're shooting, it'll pre-populate like your knock weight. But if you're going to shoot a lighted knock, you can put your lighted knock weight in there. And then it'll calculate your arrow for you and your weight, your FOC. And then there's a speed calculator that you can take that weight and put your bow specifics in there, and it'll tell you your kinetic energy, your momentum, and your estimated overall speed. And that's accurate within, if your IBO is correct, that's accurate within 2 feet per second. So
That's pretty useful tool there.
That the FOC calculator is the most accurate FOC calculator on the market, and we spent a little over 10,000 between two engineers and the group that actually put the formula together. But that formula looked like something off of Goodwill Hunting on the chalkboard. It's so long, and but there's one assumption that has to be made in every FOC calculator, and that's how long your point is going to be. Some of them exclude the point, and when you exclude the point, you're not getting a true balance of your arrow.
Right.
So this one takes into account, what we did is we took 20 of the most popular broadheads on the market and field points, measured them out, and took the average distance. And it's very, very accurate, and it's going to give you the ability to play around with your setup quickly. Say, okay, well, maybe I don't want that much point weight, or maybe I want more point weight. And then you can take it right over to the speed calculator and figure out what speed you're going to be. So we utilize this a lot.
Yeah, that looks like it's a really, really nice form there for anybody that wants to know, what it would be. And you have your different arrows in here. The different models. So I know prices are subject to change, but you had some low end ones with the 1,000 straightness, which is better than most people are even thinking about shooting. What kind of price range you have for those for just shafts?
For shafts and the components that come with them, so that the Supernova is our line. It's a little bit more affordable, and the Supernova comes in a 204 and a 246. So you have the Supernova SD, which is your small diameter, and the traditional Supernova. The traditional Supernova, don't quote me on this, I think it's about $129 a dozen with inserts, with ethics inserts. And then the Supernova SD comes with our patented half jacket system, and that is our own system. And those are about 154 with components for a dozen.
That's not bad. We can take a look here. Here's some of the different arrows that you have.
Right. So the Gemini, that is the creme de la creme.
Okay.
It's also the most frustrating arrow that we have right now. That carbon that we utilize for that is only utilized by us and a few other aerospace manufacturers, and it's pretty much generally just for military applications. I know that I think Bell Helicopter uses this for the Apache, and for several other countries, attack helicopters that they use. So it's very strong. It's very, very light. It's very, very expensive, and because of Ukraine, it's very, very hard to get a hold of right now.
Right.
So
now I see the price center. Is that's for a quantity? Let's see, quantity of 12.
Quantity of 12. Yep, that's going to be components and bare shafts, and that's a very, like I said, it's a very expensive proposition. But the difference on that is on a 250 spine, you've got a 9.06 GPI. So you've got a very, very light GPI. So when you want to get a really high FOC, a lot of the people that are going on hunts where they want to get a high FOC, say they want to get up into the 25 to 30% range for Africa, or a moose hunt or something like that, or guys out west that are wanting to have an arrow that they can have a really good FOC on, still in the 18, 19, 20%, but they can still shoot 90 yards. So you can get really, really light with this arrow. That's the lightest GPI that I know of on the market. but it's really strong. It still has a weave on the outside, still a carbon weave on the outside. So that ties the high and low side together really tight. So that's the top of the top right there. And then we have our workhorse is the Apollo arrow. And the Apollo arrow is a 204 as well. And it is got a nice GPI. It's not as light as the Gemini, but in 250 spine is going to run about 10.7, 10.6, 10.7. And it also comes with a half jacket system. And see what a dozen of those is. Okay, so
a little bit
$50
less.
less. Yeah, about $50 less a dozen on those.
And that's basically just the cost of materials.
It's the differences in material. That's right.
But you kind of get what you pay for, when you're looking at arrows and everything else. Yeah, I know I've seen groups improve by 2 and 3 inch tighter groups just by changing from like a 3,000 to a 1,000 arrow. And for the high end shooter, we don't consider anything less than a 1, just because I need that accuracy. I need the smallest group I can, because if I'm only grouping, say at whatever distance I'm grouping at a 3 inch with the 1,000s, and I go to a 3,000s, now that might be 6 inch group, and each when you go on, if I'm shooting a 7, maybe I can only get a 10 inch group, and that's just the difference in arrows. And I've gone through and seen that, and I proved it several times. Somebody's shooting a smaller smaller tolerance, like a 3 or 5,000s, and it's like, here, shoot these. They have them shoot my Comp Pro series. I use the PSE arrows, and amazing how much tighter their groups get. I'm like, there you go.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do too with your fluctuations in your spine. So the better carbon you're going to use, you're going to have less fluctuation in your spine from top to bottom. That Apollo, the Gemini, and the Orion at 28 inches. So if anybody doesn't understand how that's done, you have rollers set at 28 inches, and you hang a weight in the center with a run out gauge that measures how much run out or how much bend is in the arrow in that 28 inches. And that's how you get your spine. So 250 spine is going to be 250 thousandths or a quarter of an inch of bend. But as you turn that arrow, as you turn that around, that might be 250 thousandths to run out on one side, and then on your weak side it may be 262 thousandths. So you have a 12,000 variance. And as you get into less expensive carbons, you start getting those numbers start getting a lot bigger. When you look at a match grade or precision grade arrow, you want them to be, say, under 4,000 run out between each arrow. Most of our arrows are less than 2,000 run out between all arrows. So it has to do with the way that we lay the carbon, the way that Andy came up with the design in the very beginning. And it costs more for us to lay the carbon that way. It's a very expensive process to lay them in the different directions, and then have the company that spins them for us be willing to do it. So we're limited also to manufacturers that are willing just to spin the carbon.
Right. So for those that don't know, can you explain why one side would be weaker than the other, and what you should be? Is there something you should be looking for when you're setting up the arrows, or?
Absolutely. So why you get a high and low side is because there's a little bit of a gap when you roll. It's called a rapid roll process. So when they're rolled, the carbon, all the layers, they're like on that Apollo 250. There's 7 layers of carbon, little tiny fine sheets of carbon that are laid in different directions, so that when it rolls up, you've got it's all rolled at one time on a mandrel to make sure it's 1,000 straight. And when they roll that, there's just a little teeny tiny line of overlap. that's going to be your high side because it's stiffer there. You've got more material right there than anywhere else in the arrow. So typically you'll get your weak side will be 180 degrees out of phase from that. Not always, but what we do is we identify where that high side is. That's an option with us. We'll identify that by hand. So there are some companies that'll put a sticker on there and they say it was done by laser. We've never found those to be more than 20% accurate. So, and then if you have a little bit lower grade carbon, and now you don't have that high side mark, what happens is it launches off the rest a different way. So you want to have, we try to get everybody to shoot that high side of the arrow in the 12 o'clock position, so that they're going to launch arrow 1, arrow 10, arrow 12, all launch the same off of your rest. When they launch the same, that's where you get a lot of the perceived accuracy. You may have been just as accurate. Your hand may have changed, your form may not. You may have been perfect on 3 shots, but your arrows had the spine in 3 different positions. And when you do that, what happens is they're going to launch differently, and then it takes longer to recover. So it's a recovery thing as well. They'll recover faster out of the bow when they're coming out with the high side up.
Now, how would we go about finding that high side, without having fancy equipment? Is there a way you can look at them and find it?
No, there's guys that swear they can, and you can't. And people used to put bubbles in the bathtub. I even tried that. It worked pretty good with aluminum arrows, but it never seemed to work. I've never been able to get it to work with carbon, where you put enough bubbles in the water and make a bubble bath and put them in there, and then high side floats to the top, or low side. I can't remember which one it was. And it doesn't really matter if you mark your high or your low, as long as you keep them consistent, so that they launch the same, But one thing that it eliminates by finding that, I'm going to say eliminates by probably 90+% is knock tuning. So when guys are knock tuning, and I'm sure that a lot of your people are familiar with, well, I bought a dozen arrows, and 9 of them are flying great, and 3 of them I can't get the fly right. Well, a lot of that is just the fact that you're probably got 3 that have a high and low side that maybe just are a little bit different than the others. But if you turn that knock about 60 degrees, or you'll go from noon to 2 to 4 to 6 and go around, you'll find that it'll pull it back in with the rest of the group eventually. But having them identified, and we mark them, we use a spine tester, and we mark them by hand. So that somebody went through that, and with ours it's difficult because as we're spinning it, you can get a thousandth or 2 off just with your fingers, and that's all that we have. That's all the variance we have is at 2,000ths, and you can do that, by just putting a little bit too much pressure with your fingers. So it takes a while for us to get that, but then once we've got it, then we mark it with a silver paint Sharpie, so that you have it when you go to fletch your arrows. And if you fletch a 3 fletch, we typically say put your cock vane on that line. And if you're doing a 4 fletch, just split 2 of them,
Yeah.
And that way you don't have any cable interference.
So if you was doing, want the stiff side up, and you're doing 3 fletch with the cock feather down, then you'd go 180 off of that. Put your cock feather on 180 off of that,
Right.
So that it puts it up.
That's exactly right.
A whole lot more to tuning arrows that I just never really paid much attention to, because shooting it at 20 yards or less, it doesn't make any difference.
It doesn't make any difference. Now, the caveat to that is the traditional bow hunter. He's going to want to take that strong side, and he's going to want that 90 degrees away from his riser. 180 degrees out from his riser. So you would want to put it 90 degrees, or like the 9 o'clock position, if you're right-handed. That way he can bend around his riser if he needs to, especially if it's not center cut. But other than
Yeah.
that, typically 12 o'clock position is best. And yeah, it's just one of those tips that'll save you time in the nock tuning process, but also will bring your groups in, make them tighter.
Yeah, I remember one time when I was shooting aluminums back before carbons, and I took all my arrows and I fletched them, had to knock on them, weighed them, wrote the weight on there. And then I took all my, because I'd buy, when I had that store, I'd buy 100 bag of points. And 100 grain tip can vary anywhere from like 95 to 105. You can have variations in a bag. So I went and found a bunch of them. I had the total weight of the arrow and the total weight of the tips, and I balanced them all out. And then I was filing the insert to get I got a whole dozen within a half a grain total arrow weight.
Yeah.
Lots of work. I did it once. It wasn't worth it doing it again, because the next year you have to do it again, because every year I get a new dozen arrows, because shooting aluminum, as you know, and some people in the audience may know, but how do you break a piece of aluminum? You keep flexing it, and eventually, even a thick piece, if you can flex it enough, it'll eventually break. And the spine on aluminum arrow is, I'd get the XX78, which is a 1.5 thousandths straightness, which is the best I could get for aluminum at the time. Then carbon come out better than that. But the only time it's that straightness is until you shoot it the first time.
Right.
Every time you shoot it, it gets less and less and less. And I'd take, I'd be grouping arrows, in the X, no problem. New arrows. By the time I got my new arrows, I'd be lucky to keep them in the white on the 5 spot.
Right. Yeah.
That's how much more they got off. They bend, and I was shooting single spots, and I'm constantly smacking the nocks and breaking those. And I use the bullet point, so it's real hard to get Robin Hoods with them, because if you're off just a fraction, they just destroy the nock and the unibushing and go. But I've gotten a few of them with them. I quit shooting single spots because I got tired of wrecking arrows.
Well, and that brings us to a good point on when we're talking about spine and being in the correct spine. If you are shooting 70, probably our hunter that calls in with most of the questions are between 65 and 70 pounds, more towards the 70-pound range, and he's usually 28.5 as the average draw length. That guy, if he's going to be shooting 100 grain insert, which is typical for us, and a 100 grain point, he's in a 250 spine. And we chronically see guys that are shooting 350s and 400 spines in that, and then they wonder why they can't group their arrows well, or they're frustrated and they know they're putting the time in and it's just not paying dividends for them. They didn't realize that they were in the wrong spine, and they get in the right spine and they call us back and like, this is so much better than anything I've ever had. Why are your arrows so, why do they shoot so well? I'm thinking they do shoot well, but it's because you were in the wrong spine for the other ones would have shot pretty good too,
Yeah.
And so knowing what spine you need to be in, if you have questions, you can always call us, but you need to be in the right spine. And if you're a little over spine, that's typically not any real big deal. But being under spine is, sometimes it's like shooting one of those pool noodles downrange. It'll eventually recover, but lots of times it's too late. I mean, slow motion video showed that some arrows take almost 20 yards to recover. The veins will eventually take over.
Right.
As long as you're not shooting a fixed blade head that's really big or something, but the veins will eventually take over and you'll get straight flight. And that's great, unless your deer happens to be 7 yards under your stand.
Right.
And you've got 20 yards of recovery. So being in the right spine and then having the right amount of vein on the back to straighten your arrow up, because they are all going to flex as they leave, and they all have to recover. But a lot of guys will see the guys that like to shoot a lot of 3D they'll have these little 1.75-inch vanes that are only a quarter-inch tall. It looks like something that, come out of an Olympic type thing. And, then they're going to throw a Montec 3-blade on front. It isn't going to work, So we're all about getting those guys with the setup, and there's a lot to it. But do you have the right amount of vane? Are you at the right size? Is it the correct length for you that you're not going to cut your fingers off? There's a lot to getting your setup right. But once you do, is there a better sport than this?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I haven't
It's more
found
fun.
one
You
yet.
can shoot it anywhere. I can
Yeah.
go in my backyard and shoot my bow. I can't go in the backyard and shoot my gun.
Right. Exactly.
I have to go. I have to go about half a mile away to go shoot it. But there's I'm out in the middle of nowhere. There's farms all over the place. So there's places in I hear gunshots from my house quite often, and my concern is, are you leaving the brass on the ground? Can I have it?
Right. Exactly. And
know-
it's a sport that you can do with your kids. You can do it with your wife or girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. I mean, it's something for the entire family that they can get into, and it is an initial upfront cost, but it's not one where you have to pay to go to tournaments all the time if you don't want to. You can have fun in your backyard. Hunting can get a little expensive. We all know that, but
Right.
the sport of archery, when you figure out all the costs of all the other sports you play, is relatively affordable for an entire family.
Right, because you don't have to get anything real expensive. You
No.
can get an inexpensive recurve and go with there, or now they have compound bows that adjust from pretty small kid up to adult. You just change settings on it and go. When I started, I started in the 60s, so there was recurve and longbows and wood or fiberglass and wood arrows. So there wasn't a
Right.
lot of options, but they didn't cost a lot. But relatively they were fairly expensive. But it's one of those sports, like you said, that is just so easy to do. And you can start shooting your bow. 3-year-olds can start shooting.
That's right.
I
And
know my son, my youngest son, when he was 5 in Cub Scouts, he was shooting all the time. In fact, when he went up to the scout camp, he knew the knock point was off on his bow and told the range instructors, like, hey, knock point's off on this bow. This is 5-6-year-old kid. Tell him there's something wrong with your bow.
that's right. And there's in this sport, as your kid starts getting older, you can get them into tournaments, and they're not that expensive. There's options, all the way up to the Olympics for shooters.
Right.
And it's not something you have to give up when you get older. You might drop your poundage down a little bit. Your shoulders start to hurt, and this, that, and the other. But we have guys that are shooting 40-pound bows now. A guy talked to 2 weeks ago, 83, shooting a 40-pound bow now, but we set him up an arrow he's going to go out and deer hunt with. So it is not one of the things you have to spend a ton of money on the equipment, but there's a few things that you just absolutely cannot skimp on. You can't skimp on your carbon. Obviously that's self-serving, right? But the truth is you can't skimp on your carbon. If you're gonna buy a bow, you can get a great bow for $500 new.
Right.
You're not going to get top of the line flagship, but you're going to get a usable good bow.
Yeah, I'd rather see him buy the lower end bow, but buy a good quality release. Spend
Good quality release.
$80 to $100, $200 on a release, because that's the point that you're going to cause a lot of problems. I don't know if you use a wrist strap, but I got a handheld as well as a wrist strap, and the wrist strap, people always fasten it on wrong. They fasten it on their hand, so it pulls the hand away. You might be back on that further joint and getting it back into here. If you feel the trigger move, what do you think about feeling the trigger, feel the move? So now what are you not doing? You can't aim and think about the finger or the trigger. So if you're thinking about your finger, pulling the trigger or feel it moving, what did you stop doing? You stopped aiming. What are you going to hit? Don't know, because you're not aiming anymore.
That's right.
So spend the money and get a good quality release.
Yep. That's
buy
a
the
must.
$500 setup and spend $200 on a release.
That's
You know,
right.
$100 on a release. Don't buy the cheap releases because their edges, they're not going to do you any good. And then
That's
your
right.
arrows, like you said, you know, you can take a low end. Well, if you could find a PSE Nova, you're going to build drill holes with it all day long. But you need a
That's
good
right.
quality release, you need good arrows, and you need good form.
That's
Bow
right.
doesn't matter. It just
That's
makes
right.
it easier.
And I will say, I'll plug for the broadhead. You don't have to spend a ton of money. You don't have to buy tough heads. Tough heads are in that top end tier with, you know, we use S7 tool steel in our broadheads. They're a high end. Now they come with a lifetime warranty, and if you ever were to tear one up, you know, we send you a new one. But Magnus makes, you know, a broadhead that's a very nice, affordable broadhead that isn't going to collapse on you when you hit a shoulder bone. You know, so
Yeah.
there's affordable options out there that, but you do have to do a little bit of research and find one that's gonna stand up to a shoulder bone or a shoulder blade, or, you know, a femur if you accidentally hit one. But, you know, release, you're exactly correct on that. You don't have to spend a ton of money on a sight, but get a mid-range sight. You don't want, I'm kind of against the True Glow that come with almost every one of the packages, because I swear they say they're a point, what is it, 0.19 size, but the thing is, when you get it out in the sunlight, it looks like it's about a 30 thousandths or 40 thousandths. It's so big. But
Yeah.
spend a mid-range on that. Really good release, great carbon, and a good quality broadhead. Save your money on the bow.
Yeah, I know. My first real good wrist strap was a Scott. I bought used in '95. I still have it. I still use it. When I'm demonstrating how to use a wrist strap, I still use it. I have a Carter Chocolate Addiction that I use for my handheld. That's what I hunt with. But in my backpack I have that Chocolate Addiction that I hunt with. I have my Scott release in there because it has a little hook. I can hook it up without looking at it. That's my backup. And then when I had my shop, TrueFire had a release that was similar to, you know, the handheld ones. And, you know, half to third the cost. And they sent me one to try out. It's like, and that's my other backup in my bag. So I carry 3 releases with me when I go hunting. And I can tell the difference between this. At that time, it was like a $75 release as opposed to a $150 release. You know, that was my wholesale prices for them back then. And I could tell the difference because you can feel a little bit of movement. It's not near as sharp. I have my handheld set up where it's as hard as spring that they make to put in it, because I don't want it. There's no movement, you know, or there's such a small movement that I can't really tell. And, you know, have to put quite a bit of pressure on it before I start pulling. And, you know, my son has a different Carter that's lighter spring. And as soon as I go in, that thing goes up. I can't shoot his, it's too light. You know, I don't like a real sensitive trigger on my archery equipment. Now, my rifles, yeah, a little different story there. You know, I shot a rifle team in high school, and we had to have at least a 1 pound trigger. And they would go to matches, they'd put a 1 pound weight on it, and it'd have to hold that 1 pound weight, or you had to adjust it up. You couldn't have less than 1 pound trigger pull. Yeah. Now, most of your rifles are going to have 3 or better, but some of them are even more than that. But, you know, that's different. So a lot of the firearm shooters to start archery do that, slam on that trigger, and you can't do that with archery. You know.
Yeah, so that I've gone back and forth. I tell you, that's been one of the, you know, one of the things in my archery career that I've just never been settled. I've gone from thumb to index, to thumb to index, to thumb to index, and now I've settled. About the last year and a half or so, I've gone to the Stan index release. I really like that Extinction 2 that they have, and one of the things you'll get on a little better quality release is adjustability, whereas you won't get that on some of the others, low end. But I've got this one set up so that it is pretty light. but I can pull back with my finger, kind of behind it, so that I'm not anywhere near it when I'm pulling
Right.
back. I can pull back, and then I can set it up there and just use my back, just almost like a back tension release, to pull through the shot when, and I don't know, next year you talk to me, I might be back to a thumb release. I don't know. But it just seems like I've gotten so much more accurate at longer distance. My close distance, I don't know that I really noticed much of a difference one to the other. But as I got into those, 60, 70, 80, 90 yard shots where I had to use a lot of concentration on both form on my bow arm, but also with my release and breathing and all that, it just, for whatever reason, I'm more accurate with the index. But everybody's different, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and some think that, because you have to shoot them differently between, the index and the thumb, which I don't use a thumb. The thumb isn't the proper way to use those anyway,
Right.
because
right.
you have less dexterity in your thumb, you do your index finger. So you're going something that's less dexterous, and it didn't work. So I put it back in the seam between the index finger and there. And I put my thumb against it, put pressure on it. Now on mine, if I want to fire it, I can just tighten on my fist, it'll fire it. But I don't do that, because I go back and I come back. And now the difference between the two, I can switch between the two. Actually, no difference in the way it shoots. Everything's exactly the same. The only difference is with the handheld, I come back and I'm back here by my, with the headphones I can't do, but my knuckle is right in that pocket behind my ear with the index. But the handheld, no, my hand has to turn over, so it's a different spot. But because I have a kisser button, a peep, my touch my nose, and the peep, those 3 points touch. Doesn't know what my hand does back here. It can be here, it can be, sitting flat, it can sit in the horizontal, whatever, but it still engages those back muscles. I can engage them the same way. So it all fires the same no matter which release I'm using. And, that I like, because I don't have to worry about which release I have, because nothing changes.
Yeah. And when you own an archery company, one of the things that you don't get to do is go and shoot tournaments and things like that anymore. So we've with Sirius TV, we travel pretty extensively hunting now, and so that's taken the place of a lot of the tournaments. And I do think it's a little bit easier to hunt with a index release, although it's easy if you've got a clip-on release with a for a thumb button. That certainly makes it easy too. But I fidget with things all the time, and I'm constantly moving. And next thing I know, I've dropped the thumb release, climb down out of the stand, pick it up, and about an hour later, I drop it again. So it was just easier to have something strapped to my wrist.
Right.
And, but no, everybody's got their own different style, and that's another thing I like about this sport. And nobody has to do the same thing the exact same way.
Yeah. Well, the only thing we have in common is we store energy in a bow and aim.
That's right. That's right.
Whether it's a crossbow, you pull the string, you start energy and you have to aim. And,
That's right.
Whether it's longbow recurve, doesn't matter, that you're doing the same thing. And, like I like to say, I define archery as a stick with a string flinging another stick.
That's right.
And, crossbow, longbow, recurve bow, some weird design bow that some of these countries have used, they've got some weird shapes to them. It's still a string flicking, a stick with a string flinging another stick. And that's what's always really nice about archery. It's all archery, and it's been around for 64,000 years, and I don't see it leaving anytime soon.
No, you're just storing potential energy and then releasing it and making it turning into actual work. And that's one of the things that we talk about with our arrows, and why it's so important not just being the right setup to make sure that you have the right flight characteristics built into your arrow. Because once that arrow leaves that string, you are no longer in control of anything.
No,
it's up to the animal and how that arrow performs. And so, since there's another factor in there, which is that animal, which can move, which can, you know, or maybe you just didn't have the best form on that shot or whatever. You need to put the odds in your favor by having the right arrow in there. And I'm not saying a serious arrow, I'm saying have the proper arrow with the right flight characteristics. And when we talked about our speed before, you've got an arrow that you're flinging 300 feet per second and you're really good with it. And that is fantastic because your form's great every time. And, you know, you twirl the arrows, it comes up out of your quiver just right. And it looks so cool. And you get there and you shoot, right? And that's great on flat ground at 20, 30, even 100 yards. But when you've got that buck of a lifetime, you got that 170 in front of you, and you're having to turn your body around a tree to make that shot, you better have a forgiving arrow on there.
Right.
Because that form's not going to be the same, I promise you. I promise you, it's not the same at up in that tree stand at 10 yards that it is at 100 yards on flat ground.
No. Yeah, we've
not.
had many conversations about shooting up and downhill and the problems coming into that, and just something we have to do. And it's nice that we have a lot of information out here that we can lean on. And you know, looks like you know, you have with your Sirius Archery is a lot of good information that you can learn from, and you know, just go from there. And
yeah,
I know you was talking about, you know, broadheads. I've been shooting muzzy broadheads for decades, and you know, they're saying it's bad to the bone. Yeah, I've shattered some bones with it, and it just goes through there. In fact, and one day I saw how tough they were. And I had my store. I was shooting after I closed the store. I had a broadhead target I was shooting, and I don't know, something went wrong, and I stuck that broadhead in a concrete block wall. I'm still using the broadhead.
yeah.
Now the arrow got cut down and the insert got cracked in half, but it didn't hurt the broadhead. It was thick. The shaft was laying on the ground, but the broadhead was still stuck in a concrete block.
Yeah, and it every time we do some sort of testing with an arrow and we just put something out on Facebook, we get guys saying, "Well, we're not shooting concrete walls." I get it, but when I can bounce one of our broadheads off the wall or stick it in the wall, take it out and bring it back in and sharpen it, you know, if that's a 180 buck or a Cape buffalo, whatever that hunt of your lifetime is for you, and that animal standing directly in front of you, you'll know that testing was done into a block wall. You know,
Right.
it was done. And so, you know, these guys that are constantly, we did a little video just for fun. We had a 17 gauge piece of steel. And if you ever watch John Luff, he does some really good reviews on arrows. And he does a 3 or 5 shot test in the 22 gauge, which is a lot thinner. And we had it was a divider from like a stack on gun case that one of our guys wasn't using. And we shot it 101 times with the same arrow and the same broadhead. And you wouldn't believe the amount of just snarky feedback that we got about shooting it. Why would you ever shoot something 101 times? And yeah, that was my favorite one. Why would you shoot 101 times? And I had to reply back, because 100 just seems ridiculous. Why would you only do it 100 times? So we did 101. You know, anyways, but you know, if you've got a good quality company, they're putting that stuff through the paces. And that way you can go out and know 100% when you let that arrow fly that you did everything you could to put the odds in your favor. Then it's up to the arrow flight and the animal.
Well, and then nice thing about that is, okay, you're shooting, let's say you're out on an elk hunt, you know, a little bit bigger, a little bit tougher ribs, and you hit a rib and you destroy your broadhead on the rib.
Yeah.
Are you going to get the animal? No. Are you going to kill
Good
the animal?
chance now.
No. Good chance, no, because it bounced off the rib. Now you take, you know, like one of your broadheads or any of them that has been tested against, you know, concrete blocks, or, you know, have that good point on them. Yeah. Now, granted, you know, like the muzzies I shoot, it's not a super sharp point, but the broadheads are. But you know what? That point is designed to go through and bust through whatever you happen to have. You know, like yours, you're tough. You need to bust through that, and so you bust through it and the tip dulls a little bit. But the rest of the blade is still fine. It's just cutting like it should, so, the tip doesn't make as much difference if you have enough power to go in. The cut on contact ones are nice because they start slicing right away. But if you hit a bone, some of those, depending on the design, are going to dull and bend.
Mhm.
I shot
And that's why we have a Tanto tip on all of our broadheads, and that gives you one. It does a couple things on off angle shots. What it does is helps to penetrate in and grab skin and muscle early so that you don't have deflection. It cuts down on deflection. But the other thing that Tanto tip does is it starts making a much bigger hole for the rest of the broadhead to slide through. And to your point, I'm sure a lot of you guys watch Meat Eater, but Giannis Patella shoots our arrows in our broadheads. And he had two different instances. One last year he shot a nil guy, and I think that video just went up not long ago. And it was a little bit back but quartered away. And it ran 42 inches through that nil guy through a stomach full of grass. And because they did the necropsy on YouTube, and he killed that animal. But then the big one was this past year he had an elk. And I don't know, I didn't get the full story on what happened, but it kind of went in the rear ham and ran all the way through that elk and came out the neck. And that's because he uses ultra sharp Evolution Series broadheads, and he has the right weight on his arrow. You're not going to do that with a 400 grain arrow, not through an elk. I don't care what you're shooting at. I don't care how many feet per second you're shooting it at. So having that extra oomph when that issue happens, because I'm sure he didn't mean to shoot where it did. It turned or something, either in a shot or, I know it's getting towards dark. I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but I'm sure nobody intends to shoot through the ham and come out the neck.
Right.
But when that happens, you want to make sure whatever you got out there is gonna punch through and get the job done. That only comes from ultra sharp broadheads that penetrate well. And Dr. Ashby has done quite a few cool studies. Obviously, a lot of people either like his stuff or you hate it. It's one way or the other. But we tend to believe that it's accurate. And until somebody else does 3,000 confirmed kills with that much data to prove him wrong, we're going to continue to follow it. But
yeah, I would.
He does some testing where you take a 2-inch wide mechanical and try to push it through the hide of a deer. And it's up to 52 foot-pounds of kinetic energy to push a 2-inch wide rage type broadhead through just the hide. So a lot of guys that are shooting a 60-pound bow at a 28-inch draw, they're barely getting enough 60 foot-pounds of kinetic energy to start. So where do you go from there if it takes 52 pounds to open up and get through the skin, where do you go if you hit one rib?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've seen that a few times where, the mechanicals open up, big a hole, but very little penetration.
Yeah.
And is that going to kill the animal? Maybe, maybe not. That's why I think that the lower pounding ones need to stay with fixed blades. They're a little harder to get tuned. I know I shoot 4-inch feathers on all my arrows, just because I'm old and that's what I got used to, and I like them.
Well, and you look at you're exactly right. If you're in a lower poundage, we like everybody shooting fixed blades when you can. But even with guys shooting mechanicals have killed a lot of animals, right? We can't deny that they have killed a lot of animals. But when you're going out there and you're spending this much time and effort and money on your sport, you've got, again, 160, 170, 180 inch buck walking in front of you, and you accidentally hit that shoulder blade. You wouldn't believe the number of calls we get in September and October here saying, I'm done with this setup. I hit the biggest buck of my life, and it didn't even go in 3 inches because they hit the shoulder blade. And
Right.
they sucked up all their energy just trying to get through skin, and now they hit a hard bone and they're done. So that's a lot of calls we get in late September and early October.
Yeah, I know. I end up going through the shoulder blade quite a bit. But shooting muzzies that they don't care about the shoulder blade, and except that one little spot on the shoulder blade that's like cast, like steel. There's one spot on there when you hit that. I don't think there's much going to go through that, just because there's that one spot that's really tough, and if you get up into that, but I've done, with my broadheads right through, no problem with
Yeah.
that shoulder blade. The blade part of it, not the big meaty, the bony part. I've hit bones and shattered bones and still pass through, and that's have a good broadhead that can do that is real important, because now I don't have to worry about, am I going to hit a bone and destroy the broadhead. I know one time I shot a buck that had a kind of weird rack on it. One was somewhat normal, the other one just kind of was weird. And when I was cleaning it, I was taking the back strips out, and I hear this clunk. One of those broadhead, one of those blades on some of the cheap ones don't stay in real well, and it was stuck in right there by the spine. Deer healed up just fine. It just had a weird rack on it.
Yeah.
But here the broadhead fell apart inside the deer.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I don't want, because you can see those, some of them, they're just not very good at all. And yeah, spend money on good broadheads.
If you can flex the blade on it, it's too weak to hold up to any kind of heavy bone impact.
Yeah.
So when you look at your blade, look at the width too of what the cut. Everybody likes these wide cuts because they're so easy to trail the blood. Yeah, they are, until the blood runs out, and that's what happens with a lot of them. Because when you put a 3-inch gash in a deer, but it only goes 2 or 3 inches deep, and you didn't get into any viral, it's going to bleed for that 100, 200 yards, and then disappears. It's gone. So
yeah, it coagulates up, and it's not, like you cut your finger, you hold it. If it's not a bad cut, you hold it for a little bit, and 10, 15 minutes later, it's like, oh, okay, as long as you don't flex your finger, it's good to go. And
exactly.
that's the same thing. And that's the thing, the broadheads need to be razor sharp, because anybody that's cut themselves shaving, it bleeds and bleeds and bleeds. And you cut yourself with a dull knife, you just hold it and go. But them razor cuts, that's why it's so important to have razor sharp broadheads.
You have to. And the whole clotting factor, there's a whole science that goes into that, and why you want to have a razor sharp broadhead. And a lot of them has to do with the fact that if you have a dull broadhead, the veins are like rubber bands. That's
right.
what, when you think, they'll just roll right over the blade. When you have a sharp broadhead, you're cutting many, many more of those little capillaries and vein arteries as you go through. So it's super important that you keep them sharp no matter what you're shooting.
Right. Yeah, a dull broadhead just doesn't do much good. It doesn't penetrate very well. It doesn't cut. There's not much bleeding. You don't have to have a big mechanical to get a good blood trail. I remember one time I was out, it was snow covered, and I shot this doe, and I'm tracking it. I heard it run, so it didn't run very far, and I heard it pile up. So I kind of had an idea where it was at. And I'm following the footprints. The blood trail is about 3 or 4 feet off to the side. It was, and that was just, fixed blade broadhead. The muzzies are like what, 1 1/8 or 1 I think 1 1/8 inch cut diameter, something like that. They're not very big, but you hit the right spot, you don't have a problem.
And that's with our single bevels. The penetration on a single bevel is because we sell 3 blades as well. Penetration is superior on heavy bone, anything with a single bevel, but the downside is guys complain that they don't bleed very well. especially if it's
Right.
really sharp, because it's like, you cut your finger on a paper cut, and you go, oh man, did I cut myself? And you look at it, you squeeze it, and you go, oh, daggone it, I did, and
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, I did cut myself. So we did design our version 2.0 that's all we sell now, and it does have bleeders. And what it does is it cuts a little avulsion. So if you've ever torn the end of your finger like that, you've taken a hunk of skin off, that dude bleeds for a good long time. But when you just paper cut it, you gotta kind of squeeze it to see if it's cut. So we there's the blood rings. You'll see them there.
Yeah, for those listening, I just shared the Tough Head website, and for those watching, you get to see it. But you said here's the 2.0 that you sell most of.
Yeah. And those the little blood rings on there, you'll see probably in that first picture. Those are optional. So some guys they only want to shoot a single bevel. They don't want any bleeders on them. And some of our competitors, they have like a fixed built-in bleeder, and so you can't remove them. So we designed these that you can remove those bleeders. And what that does is it cuts a triangle at the top and bottom of the slit that doesn't allow it to the blood to coagulate and stop bleeding. So if you put it through there, it's gonna stay open.
Are these sharp as well then?
They're sharp. They're not going to be as sharp as your main blade. They're going to have they're still going to have a burr edge to them, but that's a little bit better. We can hand hone them for you if you want, but what we have found is that actually grabs lung tissue as it goes through. So
you've got the two blades that are sharp that's slicing through it, and the bleeders are designed to grab some tissue and take along with it.
Yeah, we want that to have a little bit more of a burr edge so that it's grabbing as it's going through, and it's going to be ripping on the other side a little bit more of an ball, so that it's going to bleed better for you.
Yeah, I normally buy them in groups of 6, so that's you got 125, 150, and 200 grains. That's
right, and very shortly we'll by the time this comes out, probably we'll have a 100 as well.
Yeah.
So
100 is what I shoot.
And then it's S7 tool steel as well. So it's going to look just exactly the same profile, 1 3/16 wide. It's just going to have cutouts instead of having them dished out. So, and then, but we worked on that. That took us quite a while too, because we had to go back and forth on design. We wanted to make sure what we call quiet vent, that they were no louder than shooting a regular broadhead. And you can do it, but you have to bevel the way that you do the vent holes. And so that was and by doing that, then you have to make sure the flight characteristics out to 100 were the same. So it's a process. Everything's a process. Everything's R&D.
Yeah.
Everything's just more money. Then more money.
Well, and they're not cheap, but I know when I was getting my muzzies, they were like $36 a half a dozen, and I don't know what they are now because I haven't looked, because I got enough right now. But when you're spending half of that for a good set of broadheads, why not spend a little bit more? Because they work pretty good. Now, how are they to tune? With being the two blade like that.
That's the big thing with the tuning is the easiest way to do it is we just tell people stand as close as you can to a paper tuner, and you don't have to go and make a fancy paper tuner. Just simply cut out the bottom of one of your Amazon boxes and tape a piece of computer paper to it, just printer paper, and shoot through it. But put lipstick on the leading edge of your vein and shoot through it, and aim to get the broadhead directly in the center of your vein, just like you were going to do a field point.
Right.
And you want to be as close to the paper as you can without the arrow still being on the string and touching the paper. So that's, for most guys, it's about 1 yard or less. But what we don't want is we don't want the veins to have any effect on flight yet. So you don't want a lot of air on the vanes. You want to do this up very close, because what we're looking at is to get that pure power stroke coming out of that bow. We want to know when that thing is absolutely flying pure straight out of the bow. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you can get that, like on a 3-blade, it's pretty easy. It looks a lot more like the bullet hole you would get at your shop when you're just trying to get something tuned up. But we get the broadhead right in the middle of your vein. We call that lipstick tuning. Once you've got that, you can go outside and set your pins, because you can't get more pure than coming right out of your bow at 1 yard. So if that's correct, everything's perfect on that, just go set your pins. So easy. Where guys get hung up because they want their field points and their broadheads to hit at the exact same point. And they are two different tunes. And we could get into the weeds about oscillation and launching and everything else. But just keep in mind, they're two different tunes. Now at 20 yards, they're going to probably be pretty darn close. But a 2-blade on the front, like say the single bevels we just took out in the Evolution, they actually will create a little bit of lift. They're going to have a little bit of height.
Right.
So if you go to 50 yards and try to make your field points and your broadhead hit together, you're going to be taking one of those two out of tune. So either your broadhead's tuned, your field point's tuned, but you're not going to have them hit together at 50 yards if your broadhead's in perfect tune. Just because they do not have the same flight characteristics between a field point and a broadhead. Broadhead's going to create a little bit of its own lift. Now, a 3-blade will have more drag. Okay, so you would expect that you're going to have a little bit lower point of impact when you're with your 3-blade, because it's got more drag. Whereas a 2-blade is going to create lift. So, for example, when I'm tuned to the 200 grain Evolution at 50 yards, I am about an inch higher and about a 1/4 inch right of my field points every time. I don't shoot many field points once we get close to season. It's almost all broadhead work. But if I do, let's say I'm going to go to a place where I've only got a back target available to me. As long as when I'm aiming at bullseye at 50 yards and my field points are an inch low and a little bit left, we're talking a 1/4 inch left, I know I'm dead on with my broadhead. But I'm never going to try to get guys to hit their broadheads and their field points exactly in the same place. That's trying to put a Band-Aid on something so you can shoot and make sure that everything, hits together and you can do it. And there's a lot of big name guys that tell people to do it. But there are different oscillations when that thing leaves the bow. They don't recover the same way and they don't fly the same way. And,
no, they don't.
No. And so when I'm going out to hunt and take a life, I'm going out there with my broadheads tuned. And I really don't care what my field points do,
Well, my hunting bow is that way. The field points do not hit even as close as what yours do. But I shoot the broadheads and then I tune all my broadheads so that they all hit in the same spot, and adjust my sights for that. And as I have another bow actually I got a couple other bows, but I have another bow that I shoot if I shoot field points. So now, if you can't afford another bow, buy another sight, have one just for hunting, and then change sights to go to target. And now you can shoot the rest of the bow setup should be the same. So you got your arrows are all tuned for this sight, and come time to shoot hunting, you put your hunting sight on, practice with that. Sights are cheap. You don't have to have for hunting. You don't need a big fancy, high dollar sight. Get one of the other ones, because you need your 20, 30, 40 yard pins, pretty much all you really need for most hunting around here. I have a couple more pins on mine just because, I will go practice with that bow out the longer ranges. But don't try and make them hit the same, because they're not going to. They say
No,
mechanicals will, but when you look at it, like we talked about earlier, how long is their field tip versus how long is your mechanical? They're quite a bit longer.
that's
So
right.
then, your front and center chain may change. Most hunting things around here, that most of us do, in the Midwest, that is close range. Yeah, it doesn't matter. We're not
No,
gonna notice a difference.
no, no. And having those two different tunes, we're not talking about having to shim a cam or something. We're talking about micro adjustments in your rest. So, if you go from, and you want to shoot your field points all summer long, fantastic. Lipstick tune as you're getting close to season, and get your broadheads out there and practice with them, and then sharpen them up, and you'll be ready to go. We're talking just micro adjustments on the rest. And so you don't have to have, you're exactly right, you don't have to have two bows. You just a lot of bows you could buy just an additional arm and housing, and just slide it in the dovetail, and you're ready to go with your whichever one you want to shoot. So, I like to, in early season, when I'm going to be shooting out to 100, my arrow is only 422 grains or something. I mean, it's really light. The bow's ridiculously loud. But we'll use that up until, for most guys, we're talking start with your broadheads around August. You have a couple places that have an early velvet season, like Kentucky, and I think one of the Carolinas, and that, where you're starting in September. And most guys can take their broadheads and keep them packed away until mid-August, get it tuned up, and go from there and shoot your field points all spring long. And because IBO and ASA and all that, I think, are generally wrapping up about the time hunting season starts coming in.
Yeah.
So, no reason not to go out with anything less than the very best tune you can put on them.
Well, you owe it to yourself and the animals to, have the best chance at, making a good clean kill and getting them in your freezer.
That's right.
We go out to shoot the deer to get put meat in the freezer.
That's right.
If we didn't want to put meat in the freezer, we go to 3D shoots. And they don't
Right.
worry about broadheads.
Right. But foam tastes terrible. So
yeah, it don't taste good.
no.
Well, we've kind of been on here for a little while. So what do you have in parting thoughts that you'd like to let our audience know?
Well, I think we solved all the problems of the world here today, but I appreciate you having us on. And if you catch us on Sirius TV, see a lot of good video, but you also see a lot of, when we miss, or, you'll see an episode where Connor killed a trophy blind. He took one of our arrows and he was shooting at a javelina, and why you have to make sure you know what's behind you when you shoot, because it actually skipped off a rock when he hit low, and just perfect flight down the sendero, and buried into a brand new blind that this outfitter had. So there's a lot of stuff like that where you'll see, a lot of interesting stuff. We went rattlesnake hunting last year, javelina hunting, we've been to Africa, and bear hunting, of course, and deer hunting. But try to be a little bit unique with Sirius TV. We're on Carbon TV and on YouTube, all of our stuff there. But we also have a lot of tech tips. So we have a new tech series that just came out. In that tech series, we've got how to sharpen a 3-blade broadhead, or how to sharpen a single bevel. Just a lot of stuff that's coming out, that how to glue veins on, for guys that want to do it at home, that kind of stuff. So there's more than just the entertainment. There's some education there too. So check us out on Sirius TV.
Yeah, and I'll leave some links in the description for all those places for the listeners and watchers to find your different places to catch you.
Yeah, and when they get done with listening to your podcast, which are probably more entertaining, we have some really stupid stuff that we have out there on our podcast. So, some additional entertainment. We have some. We just finished up one with T-Bone, that was a great one. He's a super guy in our sport, and so when they're done listening to yours, then you can come over and listen to ours.
Yeah, is yours just audio, or is yours video as well?
It's just audio, yeah.
Just audio.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun doing these. I can do these all day long. There's so much fun doing and getting to talk.
You
to
get two
different
old
people
guys like us in the room, and we could go on for hours.
Well, yeah, about two, in fact. Well, my name is Roy Canterbury. I'm your host today on Arch Talk 101 with our special guest. If I can talk, Seth, and we'll see you in the next one. This is episode number 91. So stay tuned for the next one. I'll have to figure out something to do special for number 100.
Thank you.
But see everybody later.
Bye-bye.